And we welcome you back into Newsmax. Now we're going to take a listen into President Obama commenting on the shooting in Charleston that left 9 people dead. Here is Mr. Obama.
Tragedy. There is something particularly heartbreaking about a death happening in a place in which we seek solace and we seek peace, in a place of worship. Mother Emanuel is, in fact, more than a church. This is a place of worship that was founded by African Americans seeking liberty. This is a church that was burned to the ground because its worshipers worked to end slavery. When there were laws banning all black church gatherings, they conducted services in secret. When there was a nonviolent movement to bring our country closer in line with our highest ideals, some of our brightest leaders spoke and led marches from this church's steps. This is a sacred place in the history of Charleston and in the history of America. The FBI is now on the scene with local police, and more of the Bureau's best are on the way to join them. The Attorney General has announced plans for the FBI to open a hate crime investigation. We understand that the suspect is in custody, and I'll let the best of law enforcement do its work to make sure that justice is served. Until the investigation is complete, I'm necessarily constrained in terms of talking about the details of the case. But I don't need to be constrained about the emotions that tragedies like this raise. I've had to make statements like this too many times. Communities like this have had to endure tragedies like this too many times. We don't have all the facts, but we do know that, once again, innocent people were killed in part because someone who wanted to inflict harm had no trouble getting their hands on a gun. Now is the time for mourning and for healing. But let's be clear. At some point, we as a country will have to reckon with the fact that this type of mass violence does not happen in other advanced countries. It doesn't happen in other places with this kind of frequency. And it is in our power to do something about it. I say that recognizing the politics in this town foreclose a lot of those avenues right now. But it'd be wrong for us not to acknowledge it. And at some point it's going to be important for the American people to come to grips with it. And for us to be able to shift how we think about the issue of gun violence collectively. The fact that this took place in a black church obviously also raises questions about a dark part of our history. This is not the first time that black churches have been attacked, and we know that hatred across races and faiths pose a particular threat to our democracy and our ideals. The good news is I am confident that the outpouring of unity and strength and fellowship and love across Charleston today, from all races, from all faiths, from all places of worship, indicates the degree to which those old vestiges of hatred can be overcome. That certainly was Dr. King's hope just over 50 years ago, after 4 little girls were killed in a bombing in a black church in Birmingham, Alabama. He said they lived meaningful lives and they died nobly. They say to each of us, Dr. King said, black and white alike, that we must substitute courage for caution. They say to us that we must be concerned not merely with who murdered them, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy which produced the murderers. Their death says to us that we must work passionately and unrelentingly for the realization of the American dream. And if one will hold on, he will discover that God walks with him and that God is able to lift you from the fatigue of despair to the buoyancy of hope and transform dark and desolate valleys into sunlit paths of inner peace. Reverend Pigney and his congregation understood that spirit. Their Christian faith compelled them to reach out not just to members of their congregation or to members of their own communities, but to all in need. They opened their doors to strangers who might enter a church in search of healing or redemption. Mother Emanuel Church and its congregation have risen before, from flames, from an earthquake, from other dark times, to give hope to generations of Charlestonians. And with our prayers and our love and the buoyancy of hope, it will rise again now as a place of peace. Thank you.
All right, there you have President Obama delivering remarks following the fatal shooting of 9 people in Charleston, South Carolina at the Emanuel AME Church there. Of course, this has been covered very widely here on Newsmax Now and on Newsmax.com. The shooter, Dylan Ruth, is now in custody after a manhunt that was very intense this morning. He was arrested during a traffic stop in South Carolina. But President Obama there invoking the words of Martin Luther King Jr., talking about the church bombings in Birmingham, making a parallel between this and that horrific event all those years ago.
And saying that this church has been through earthquakes, it's been through fires, it has fallen, and it will rise once again. And again, Dylan Roof is in custody. We're receiving word, there's been information out that he received a gun for his birthday by his father. That's information coming from his uncle. You heard the president there bringing up gun violence once again, saying it's something that we need to deal with here in America.
A very similar tone to the address President Obama gave shortly after the Sandy Hook shooting as well. He referenced that, talking about these types of tragedies happening far too often, and again talking about gun violence in a way the country needs to address the situation. We have obviously been dealing with a fluid situation here today on the program. We were supposed to have Republican strategist Ford O'Connell and attorney Chelsi Henry, also a political strategist, with us. I believe they are standing by. Are you guys there?
Nice to have you.
Good to have both of you with us, guys. I just wanted to, before we moved on to other business, wanted to first, Chelsi, get your response. I don't know if you were able to hear the president speak there, but invoking the words of Martin Luther King, talking about the Birmingham church bombings when those 4 little girls lost their lives, comparing that to today.
Today, it's very difficult. When I woke up to the news this morning, and so as I listened to President Obama's speech, you know, I echo his sentiments that this is heartbreaking. However, I differ in terms of his support and his views on guns. And I believe that this is the time to have the conversation about the Second Amendment, and this is the time to have the conversation about how it is important for each of us to know that we can protect ourselves, and that it's people that kill people and not the guns in and of themselves.
Ford, your thoughts?
Well, I think that President Obama struck the right tone, and what I'm worried about is that I think he's more concerned about limiting the Second Amendment than he is ending hate crime, and unfortunately this appears to be a hate crime. Hopefully we'll get to the bottom of this and the right person will go to jail, or at least get the death penalty for it.
Does this kind of set, I mean, when I'm watching this, you're sitting there going, man, race relations just seems to be getting worse and worse in this country. What was your thoughts about that, Chelsi?
Well, I think it was very clear from all the information that I've read this morning that this is a hate crime, and you know that's what they've been saying in the media. And when you look at the past year of just the recent unrest that have taken place across this country, from police shootings to different incidents, race relations is an issue that we must address. And I think that it's important for us as individuals to start within ourselves, start within our communities, and begin to have the conversations, because as we heard, the president will have his view on it, but what's most important is the actions. You know, I'm a person of faith and I've been praying for Charleston, but now it's the question of what are our next steps in helping to eliminate these things from happening, because this is a tragedy.
before we know what the president thinks that we should do. What do you think in response to Chelsi's statement right there? What do you think the next steps are going to be?
Well, that's going to be the question, is every time we try to have a national conversation about race, it becomes anything but race. And that is my concern. Hopefully the president can lead us in the right direction on this, and hopefully we can mend a lot of fences, because obviously race relations in the U.S. in the 21st century are still not where they should be.
All right, difficult subject for sure. We'll keep our eye on the latest developments. We do know this, the suspect here, Dylan Ruth, has been arrested. He is in police custody after a traffic stop. But let's move on because we want to talk about some other stuff going on. Ford and Chelsi, let's transition now. We're going to talk about a GOP counteroffensive, as some are describing it, to the so-called war on women. We know this is going to come up again in 2016 here. Meantime, U.S. Senators Kelly Ayotte and Cory Gardner have introduced legislation that would increase access to safe and effective contraceptions. They want to make birth control pills available over the counter. Chelsi, what do you think about this move, and are you at least encouraged that Republicans seem to be proactive now in the so-called war on women?
I am encouraged. First off, let's just say I've never thought there was a war on women by Republicans. We have been supporting women's rights and women's for centuries. In terms of contraception and birth control being available over the counter, there are over a dozen medical reasons why women take birth control, over 1.5 million women who use it for medical reasons. And so I think that this is a great step forward in the right direction as we do a better job at sharing our message and our beliefs to all demographics. So whether that's women, minorities, youth, we have the conservative principles that work. We just need to do a better job at communicating them. And I think these senators are on the right track.
But we've also heard some concern from opponents saying that making it more accessible will also make it more costly. Ford, what do you think?
Well, I think that what's happening here is that the Republicans are digging at the bread and butter play of the Democrats, which is the war on women. And understand something, they've been running up large scores of unmarried women precisely because they're playing on emotion and they're not stating the facts. The deal is to repeal the portion of Obamacare so you can drive costs down and increase access. The deal is under Obamacare and under the government health plan, you're paying $15. The cost isn't actually $15. And if you can repeal this, which Democrats don't want to have happen, provide incentives to Big Pharma, which the Republicans are trying to do, then you will drive down the cost, because when more people use it, guess what? The cost of the widget goes down, and Republicans are on the right track. The problem is Democrats are trying to play games and not let Republicans reach the end line on this.
But there are some valid, I would say, health concerns that some people are bringing up, that you're not consulting a doctor, and birth control can come with side effects. Chelsi, what do you think? Well,
with any other medication, when you receive that prescription, whether it's on the back or whether it's something, whatever the medication is, the side effects are listed. And I think that what's important is that when a pharmacist hands this birth control, if it happens to be over the counter, to an individual, they should ensure that they share these are the side effects.
Yeah, but you know as well as I know that we see those commercials all the time. As soon as they come up with one product, then you hear like a year later, warning, if you or a loved one is suffering from this, if you took this birth control pill, if you took that, and we still don't really know the long-term effects of birth control.
Well, and then that goes to the fact that there is a woman who's standing in front of the pharmacy counter asking for birth control. So there is a responsibility on her to not only know that it's helping her, whether it's for a medical reason, whether it's because she is sexually active. She has a responsibility in knowing what comes along with it.
All right, well, let's also move on. We want to talk a little bit, too, about some new poll numbers involving the 2016 race. We know that the war on women come up again. Democrats will try to fly that flag. But looking pretty good, though, all things considered. When you take a look specifically in swing states for Marco Rubio, a new Quinnipiac poll has him neck and neck with Hillary Clinton, especially in Florida. He's down by 3 points there. In Pennsylvania, he's actually up a point. In Ohio, down by 3 points. Well within the margin, or close to the margin of error there, but within striking distance for sure. Of course, we had big announcements this week. Ford, do you expect these numbers to hold up here with the new entries into the race this week?
I absolutely do, and here's why. This polling from Quinnipiac tells us more about Hillary Clinton than it does about Marco Rubio. Hillary Clinton, when it comes to trustworthiness, is underwater 8 to 14 points in many of these states. So while this is a good sign for the Rubio camp, this tells me a lot more about Hillary Clinton than it does about who the Republican nominee is going to be when it comes to an electability argument.
So what are you hearing about Bush and Trump? Are their numbers going up since they officially announced?
Well, Bush's numbers are sort of stagnant, if you will. And what he's trying to do is branch beyond moderate Republicans who he hasn't completely gotten into the camp. One of two reasons. One is his last name, and the other thing is Jeb Bush has to show that he can beat Hillary Clinton in a head-to-head matchup. So right now, the onus is on Jeb Bush to push his numbers up. As for Donald Trump, he's a bombastic self-promoter who's most concerned with controversy and headlines, and unfortunately, while that's a better-suited resume for a circus clown, the problem here is that I'm worried that Trump is basically going to go no-holds-bar and really do something terrible that's going to reflect poorly on the serious candidates like Marco Rubio, Scott Walker, and Jeb Bush.
All right, well, Chelsi, since you are based in Tallahassee, Florida there, who's your favorite among the two, Jeb or Marco? Last word.
I support both of them. This is about Florida, and I want to see the next person in the White House be from Florida. So whether that's Jeb or Marco, I definitely think Jeb has a leg up. He has policy experience from his time in the governor's office, and I think his announcement speech was fabulous this past week.
It certainly did get a lot of folks pumped up, and anybody who remembers Governor Jeb Bush, it's hard to argue against his conservative credentials. We'll see what happens when the primary comes to Florida, if it makes it that far. Chelsi Henry, Fort O'Connell, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.